Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course I'm joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and we've talked about this so many times before. If your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks, through digital transactions, it's never yours, it's always the bank's, and you are enslaved by the banking system. And this is the goal of the global cashless society. And we've reported before in India, 86% of currency, cash and coin in circulation, was taken out of circulation. And of course, at the G20 this past year, Nobel laureate was praising the idea of a cashless society in the United States in the near future, where they could totally take all cash out of circulation and put everything through centrally planned digital currency. We're not talking about blockchain here. We're not talking about cryptocurrencies. We're talking about fiat via digital transaction. Now, it's important to mention that fiat, as it is, only 3% of fiat is actually printed on paper and the rest is digital. So we're partway there. But you'd still have this worthless fiat in hand. Now, when it's in hand, it's at least yours. At least you have it. When it's in the bank, always through digital transactions, and you never hold it, it's always the banks, so you are essentially enslaved to the banks. And the story goes on, folks, because what we're watching in India is continuing to elapse. John, can you go into this?
Yeah, well, as the article says, India could become the first cashless society in the world. What is interesting, though, is India started out with about 2% of people being and using digital currency.
Yeah.
And now, today, that's a whole different story because they have gone into great scale of implementing this system. Now there's of course the ban on cash, which actually is even greater than what you said. It's 85%, which is only 15% left in cash that exists in circulation, which is terrible. And of course, what Kendra Rogas said in his book Curse of Cash, which is the textbook on cashless societies. He says that we need to, stop the black market, the people that don't want to pay taxes to the government and be enslaved by the government stealing. Taxation is theft. That's the main reason why they're implementing this cashless society, is so they could just automatically go in and take out the money that they want out of your account without your consent.
Yeah, bank bail-in regimes are becoming very, very popular these days for all the wrong reasons.
And they want to implement a negative interest rate on top of that system. You got to remember that's the next step, but as we've seen in Sweden and other places, the problem is they weren't ready for the negative interest rate yet, as they said. They need to eliminate cash, so when you can't, keep cash, because cash doesn't pay you anything, it doesn't do anything, and but it's not negative interest.
You can't have a run on the bank if there is no money in the bank. What, are you gonna run into computers and what is this, some old sci-fi movie? You're gonna go like Tron into like some digital system and find that money? It's not gonna happen. No. They are trying to do this on purpose because they know that they're in vast amounts of debt. They know that the system is collapsing, and they know they need to keep people in check. They need to keep people in servitude, that debt servitude that we so often talk about.
Yeah, it's all about control. And of course, with the cashless society, there was another thing that also started to get implemented before that in 2009, which was a system called Aadhaar, which is a biometric database which they use to identify you by fingerprints and retina scans, which is another level of control over people in order to keep your information and make sure that they have you by the balls, basically. And because in 2009 only half of Indians had a birth certificate. So as it has evolved now, we're looking at 2016 numbers. 1.1 billion people in India has been implemented into this biometric system. And that's 95% of the population. And that's only over 7 years they managed to do this with a population of 1.1 billion people. And this is the technotronic takeover that we're seeing. And then, of course, with the India Stack system that they implemented just recently in 2016, the India Stack system is a series of secured and connected systems that allow people to store and share personal data such as addresses, bank statements, employee records, and tax filing. So there's more of a bigger database of and less privacy for you as well, where they're centralizing all your information about you that you could just pull out when they need to do something.
Well, yeah, and we've seen things like this happen in Australia with facial recognition passports. I mean, what we're watching with Prime Minister Modi, I really have to point it out. So many people love Modi. They think he's such a peaceful man. He is a deception. He's a great globalist, technocratic deception. The whole point of Modi's reign is in order to bring people in with smiling faces and chains they revere into the global technocratic age. And they're leading the way alongside China and a few others to pull completely into an absolute global technocracy where everyone is basically bowing down to the banking system. And this has been in the making for so long. As my recent interview with Patrick Wood, the man behind the book Technocracy Rising, I recently talked with him, and he went into the fact that this has been planned since the 1930s, and then especially since the 1970s through Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Trilateral Commission and Kissinger and David Rockefeller. And people will say, that sounds conspiratorial. There's those buzzwords again. There's those names again. This happened. It's all on paperwork. It's all out there for everyone to read. It's completely documented. This isn't a theory. This is a fact. And they brought in China into the world order in order to create a testing ground for technocracy. It's not a communist cesspool anymore. I mean, it is communistic, the governmental side. But for the most part, when it comes to the industry, it's technocratic. And the whole point is to have them and India lead the world with technocracy and bring people into these worthless currencies centrally planned through a digital ledger.
Yeah, and just to go quickly further in before we end this report, I just want to tell a little bit more about this India Stack system because it's a very interesting system. India Stack allows citizens to open bank accounts or brokerage accounts, buy a mutual fund, or share medical records anywhere in India with just a fingerprint or retina scan from Aadhaar. So there you go. You have to provide the either your fingerprint or your retina scan in order to get access to this, right? In order to have bank, they're just wanting full control over you. But put simply, as they say in the article, India Stack could be the framework for a new digital society.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, this is the whole point of this implementation in the first place, is to create a complete technocratic society, a digital society. And, it kind of reminds me of looking back at things like the movie Metropolis from 1927, I believe, where, it's just a completely technocratic society that bows down to these big corporations that are owned by the government. The government is a corporation. The corporation is a government. And everyone's enslaved, and they revere those chains, and anyone tries to break away, and there's some extremist, there's some crazy person. How on earth can you break away from this great society? Another buzzword. And this is why we need to fight harder, because people need to understand what this means. When we have a fiat system that has been in place starting from 1913 to 1971 about in the United States, and then going from 1971 as completely cashless, where it's just, well, unless you consider these bills cash, I don't know, I kind of consider value money, and that doesn't have value. But, I mean, all the same, you can hold it in your hand and you can at least own it. But the fact is, they implement this, and all these years go by, and people still don't get it. They eradicate the ability to do a proper run on the bank, because the banks don't actually reserve these holdings anymore. And now they want it completely digital, so it's impossible. It's physically impossible to do a run.
Yeah, well, what happened with the removal of cash? First of all, it was a recapitalization of the banks because they were terrible in India.
Yep.
So it was almost like a voluntary bail-in, forced by the government. Then, of course, what happened since then was that 270 million new bank accounts have been launched since that time. So that's 270 million people that are now enslaved.
Yep.
And then, of course, the India Stack could fast track the move to digital payment systems across the developed world and mark the end of cash. So just look at this India Stack system. We might do a proper report on it, because It is believed by the elites that this is the new system that they could actually take from India and then use it to adopt it into all other countries around the world. Um, this is very dangerous. What's happening here? And then, of course, the banks are benefiting hugely from this. Their stock prices has gone up. They're talking about how great of an investment opportunity it is to invest in banks in India. And of course, this is the end of freedom in India, where now people that were kind of gold. Gold, that was their backbone of their religion, basically, in most parts of India, where it was tradition, where you give all this jewelry and everything. Almost every Indian that I know, they have some form of gold that they have on hand, and they have it kind of saved, but it's still like their jewelry and all that. They are trying to really attack India because that was the bastion of gold. They were the ones, having gold everywhere. They used it for anything, and they also saved it. So they wanted to. I think the globalists really wanted to attack India head on, and they succeeded. It's really frightening, and
Yeah.
it gives me goosebumps actually. Writing through this news article and what they've accomplished in such a short period of time.
Absolutely. And I think that it's often the excuse of these globalists that it's in order to stop terrorism, it's in order to stop money laundering. First of all, go ahead and money launder. There's nothing wrong with money laundering. But when it comes to terrorism, that's that buzzword. They want to use that to scare people into accepting this insane new implementation that enslaves them. And it's so often that we see this, especially with what we've seen with blockchain not that long ago and Bitcoin, where they want to check you at the U.S. border and just to stop terrorism and all that. And tax evasion, because how dare someone try to hide their hard-earned money from the government. They want to go through your phone, go through your wallets, and see how much money you have so they can tax you and they could keep tabs on you. And this is all what it's all about.
I actually got a comment to that. So I read an article just recently that Bitcoin is eliminating the need for tax havens. So,
well, yeah,
you just hide your money in Bitcoin, and then it's in Bitcoin for the rest of the time, and you don't have to worry about it.
It's a free market, and that's something else that's getting destroyed in India. India was one of the world representatives for a great free market where people were doing well just by bartering and trading, and they've eliminated these black markets to the most extent that they possibly can. They've destroyed so many people's lives.
Tax income, right?
Yeah, they're not out to help people in poverty. They're not out to make sure that you're successful. Their whole point is to put you into debt servitude so that you aren't successful, so that you are in poverty. And people need to understand this. And you'd think there'd be torches in the streets. And this is all being implemented so that they can push later on for digital currency to go through the SDR, special drawing rights, at the IMF and create a global cashless society. This is in their playbook. They are speaking openly about this, and this isn't a theory. And I think it's about time that people start to get together and start to understand the problem, be able to call the evil by its name, and shoo the snakes out of the den.
Yeah, well, what they've been doing is they actually have chased us into a cattle pen where everybody's, stuck and ready for the slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
And they're getting ready to implement asset freezes and everything, when the new collapse happens again. And then they're ready, to just force this whole system right in our faces when we're stuck in the system. And when we can't go anywhere.
Yeah, but those cows that are heading to the slaughterhouse love the fact that there's grass. They're happy because they can eat the grass on the ground. So they're like, oh, I can eat. I'm good. This is a problem. We need to understand the problem and not just be happy with the little pittance pay that they give us, a little bit of grass that we're able to have, the little bit of food that we are able to put on our table, the little bit of Netflix that we're able to watch on TV. The fact is, this is much bigger than any of these so-called freedoms that we talk about. When our actual individual freedoms, our liberties, are being ripped to shreds right in front of our eyes, and we're doing nothing about it because we care more about what's on TV instead of what is actually truly affecting us. It's made complicated on purpose, folks. It's not complicated to understand the basic economics of this, and I really hope that people start looking further into this because it really depends, on our future. Our future depends on us understanding this and, like I said, calling the evil by its real name and shooing the snakes out of the den. So, John, thanks for going into this with us. We will continue to cover this. Of course, we've done many reports in the past on the Cashless Society. It is a globalist endgame, but until next time...
Actually, before you end... you got to go and see a report on the Cashless Society where we actually go through the playbook of Kenneth Rogoff.
Absolutely.
The Curse of Cash.
Absolutely. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Do you like what you see here at WHAM? Well, make sure to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored by YouTube. You can also see our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And also find us on steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid to blog via cryptocurrencies. You can find me at Josh Sigurdson. So we hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Wow.